want to talk about more of my anti-war, anti-Zionist, anti-capitalist art. This piece is called Divine Intervention, and I just feel like it's relevant now more than ever. Yeah. The last video I made like this, it felt really good to do, really therapeutic, and yeah, it just feels really good to talk about these things, you know. So if anyone watches this and learns anything or just feels comforted by the fact that there are other people out here that care, then that makes me really grateful. So the concept for this piece is the dark, the light, and the space that exists in between. The dark, the light, and the space that exists in between. You know, really just about this ancient idea and truth that the dark and the light coexist within our universe, and it therefore coexists within us, and that, you know, ultimately it is up to us to come to terms with that, and then from there be able to alchemize the darkness into light. And, you know, it's obviously very hard at times, especially right now, to not feel just consumed by that darkness and overwhelmed by it. But, you know, at the end of the day, I have such a hope, or rather a vision for this world, and I know so do so many other people. And, you know, we owe it to ourselves to not give up on that, because it's within us to, you know, create more light and turn this darkness into light. And I know that it will happen, and it's already happening now. You know, we are seeing so much of this. We are just in the process of so much of this darkness, you know, being brought to the surface and to the light. And yeah. Okay, so to start off with the dark component, it's pretty straightforward. The main theme metaphor is just anti-war, anti-Zionist imagery, you know, so pretty straightforward. I have right here like some mass graves. We have a lot of obviously war imagery here. This poor person is actually a dead soldier from Vietnam, and I found that piece and several of those other pieces from this this book that I found at John K. King's in Detroit. Genuinely best find I've ever had, even out of like vintage clothes, everything. This was in their free section, bro. And so this was published in 1973, and so there's obviously a lot of war imagery and things like that, and very powerful. I think that it is very important for people to be exposed to and to see images of death and destruction that is a result of imperialism and the military-industrial complex, you know, like we're seeing right now with places like Gaza. Having those people be able to post on social media, and yeah, things definitely get censored and all of that, but having those people being able to have a voice on social media has exposed a lot more people than it would have in the past to the atrocities and the death and destruction. So I think that these are really powerful pieces. And also, you know, the fact that they're black and white, obviously it's a recall to the past, but it just shows how, you know, visually war and destruction and greed drains us and our world and our lives of color and life, you know, whether that's through obviously death, destruction, environmental destruction, spiritual warfare. Yeah, so then kind of the other main colors are, you know, red. We have like a fire down here. I believe this was a famous fire in the early 1900s, a picture from that. I use this black lace here, you know, kind of a call to funerals and, you know, death. So obviously the main components here. So we also have like a skull, a slaughtered animal here, just kind of destruction, like glass breaking, shards, you know, things like that. And obviously the main focus of this piece is right here and down here as well. This is Putin. He's kind of, over by himself, isolated. But here we have Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and we have this piece that says "Deadly Friend." And I think this is just more relevant now than ever. I made this piece in the summer, but yeah, seeing what happened with Venezuela and Maduro getting captured, right? Obviously, he was not doing great things for the people in Venezuela, but if you're not brainwashed and you think critically, we know why that happened. Imperialism, resources, part of a bigger imperialistic plan. But if we're taking this man at his word, then it's like, why did he need to be captured, but you're best friends with literally the most evil and destructive war criminal, like, of our time? This man, why was he allowed to come to Mar-a-Lago and kiki it up with Trump, award Trump the first non-Israeli person the Israel award, but then Maduro needed to be captured because of drugs? It really just shows the blatant hypocrisy. Yeah, so I just thought this was even more relevant now than it was a few months ago. It just continues to be relevant. Yeah, just a few other things about this piece. I actually, with my best friend, we do craft night like basically every week, and I whipped these out all in like one night. I was just in like pure flow state, and it was a huge moment for me as an artist. Like, it was my first political piece. I'm an illustrator and designer, and so I make all of my design work as cute, cartoony stuff, and I had been wanting to make something political and something dark, and this was that first piece, so I'm really proud of it for that reason, and it felt really good to do. But I also kind of discovered my style is to have the mixed media in there with the collage, and so I was nervous to put like these sparkly elements in there, so I tried to do it very tastefully, but I really ended up liking these like silver balls here, kind of just further demonstrating the destruction of warfare and bombs and artillery and things like that, sort of representing like metal and buildings and destruction. There's that piece. Now we have the light piece, and making this piece made me emotional. I actually like cried for a minute making this, and I've never really done that, making art, like in the process of it especially. And I'm very proud of this technically, how the colors turned out, but thematically, it just was very touching and special for me to make this piece, because it really was a time, it continues to be a time, but it was a moment where I was feeling very bogged down with the darkness, and I needed to be reminded of the light and of life and connection, the reasons that we're all really here and what we're fighting for, so yeah, obviously we have nature. This piece in particular, I wasn't really expecting it to, but this made me emotional. It's of a tribal man, and he's just making a simple dinner over a fire, and it just really like hit me deep, like, whether that's just like spiritually or even like took me back to like a past life or my ancestors, where it's just like, and I love camping and things like that, and I wish and I yearn for a world when things were that simple, and I believe that we can bring that back and bring that spirit back. This piece here also made me emotional, and it's from like a random Time magazine, but it's just of these people, and it's like, warm and kind of blurry, nostalgic, the look of it, and it just really reminded me of how important community and connection and fun is, and that's what this shit's supposed to be all about, yeah. So then kind of one of the other main visual metaphors was light, and so we have these lanterns here, we have just these random bits of lighting, fireworks, obviously this fire, the light shining off of these buildings, and I guess it's pretty straightforward. Light, the sun, is what gives us life, right? But I've just found so many moments in my life, artistically, but just in my life and spiritually in general, where I'm hiking and I'm in my head and I'm feeling really bogged down by the darkness, and the sun filters through the trees like just perfectly onto my face, and I feel it warm me up, and it's enough to like make you cry, you know, to just, it feels like God, whatever God is, whatever God is to you, like in those moments you feel that, you know, you're reminded of life. And you know, same thing, I'm sitting in my room, you know, in my head, and the sun filters through my window just perfectly and onto the wall, and it glitters, and you know, it feels so spiritual to me, and it just reminds me of, yeah, the good and why we're here, something you feel down to like a cellular level, you know. So yeah, this is that piece. And then we have the in between, and this was fun to make. You know, my favorite thing is this alien, of course. I have this UFO. But yeah, you know, I title it Divine Intervention, and expanding on the idea that the light and the dark coexist. You know, it's like ancient philosophy, spirituality, yin and yang, all of that, you know, and how all of that coexists within the universe, and it coexists within us. And you know, it is up to us to embrace this gray area, and from there, you know, alchemize the darkness into light. So yeah, I have imagery of like down to the cellular level, you know, kind of what I was saying earlier. You know, it exists within us. It's how we were made. It's how we were created, however you believe that happened, you know. And then also, let's see, I have a lot of pieces talking about time. Time continues. And this is the focal point here. I felt really lucky to find this piece of the earth, more specifically in America, splitting apart. And this piece here says, when this is over, the world must gather. Yeah, pretty straightforward, you know, it's what we see in so many schools of thought, and it's just the truth of life, you know, that things need to break apart and burn down to the ground before new things and better things can be built. Yeah, and even here, this cool piece here I found of like, it's like the earth shedding for a new earth, you know. And this here says, only by coming together with a global response will we meet the magnitude of the challenges we face. Yeah, I also just have like kind of more things that represent time and interconnectedness. The CERN Hadron Collider here, if you know, you know. Yeah, so that I guess is pretty straightforward there. Once again, this was like really therapeutic and special for me to make and talk about. And so thank you to anyone who sees this and watches this, and I hope that it provided you any sort of comfort or clarity. And yeah, thanks for paying attention to my art. It like truly means everything to me, and it's what keeps me going. So